politics is downstream from pop culture. This show is at the river's bend.
What would be the motivation for not grounding flights and not shoring up the borders? I've really spent some time thinking about it, and I just can't, for the life of me, come up with an answer that I feel good about.
Don't you think to some extent everybody, especially everybody politically minded, is asking themselves that same question? And I actually think...
I don't know. I'm sure that the people that support Obama, for the most part blindly, would come up with a way to validate his decision or back up his decision. But I'm a fairly intellectual guy, and for the life of me, whether I agree with him or not, I can't understand this one. I think that...
Well, I think, and you can say this about so many things, I think, prior to this, but the thing that makes this one so interesting is you just kind of wonder, like, where does politics end and where does love for country and what's right? It's sort of if the country was attacked on our soil or something like that.
But the thing I don't get is, where's the rationale? I mean, if somebody tried to break into your house, or if there was a homeless man who, had a terrible disease that, showed up and laid on your deck or laid on your front porch, you would, as a human being, would have a very defensive reaction. Where is that reaction?
But I really think from just being around politics and talking to people of the leftist leaning, I really think they eventually become, just creatures of the left, to which everything, not just what you would consider like tax policy or education or these sort of, battery issues. I think they become political creatures and they see everything through delusional lens. I really think, as hard as it is to believe, they've gone so far in commitment, they're sycophants to the point where I really think when they see like border, they don't see safety, they see political future. And that trumps it. I believe that. Or when they see stopping flights, that's a very politically incorrect thing to do. That hurts their brand.
But they did it in Israel over skirmish that lasted all those days between Hamas and Israel. They stopped flights to Israel. Why something that was a political
But
thing?
Again, that makes my case. Because, again, that's ideology over any kind of rationale. And then the other option, so that's the thinking I have at this moment. And, of course, the stuff is so fluid day to day. But the other option is, it's crazy for the American ear to hear this, but purposeful, just purposeful malfeasance, purposeful.
My gut tells me that, and it's one of these things where when I think someone making a decision, I try my best to put myself in their position. But the problem I have with I can't dig deep enough to think of the logic that you would want your fellow Americans. You would hate them or hate this way of life so much that you would be willing to let a portion of them die to prove a point or to, support your ideology. And in this case, I really feel that he thinks in some weird way that we deserve to have the playing field leveled, and this is part of it. And I really have eliminated all other options for myself. This is all that's left.
It's funny because, I've been telling you, to lighten the mood a little bit, I've been watching Star Trek, and there's these scenes where things get so absurd that it's usually Data, because he's so rational, he'll say something like, when you remove all the rational options, what you're left with is the preposterous one is true. And then they usually go on that hunch, and then, eventually they solve the problem. I think essentially that's what you're doing here. You're like, all of the things that make any rational sense to any human being have been eliminated. So what are you left with at that point? But I'll tell you, this kind of sentiment has been growing, hasn't it? I mean, people have been asking these questions from Benghazi to Fast and Furious to this is an ideology that seems to be willing to throw absolutely anything overboard for their ideological purposes.
Yeah,
I think there's so much evidence to that.
The stuff going on with ISIS, which is now taking the back seat to terrible virus that's coming to the country. That's very serious. They seem to be spreading like a cancer across the Middle East. Every single day they take up more space, they gain more power. I can wrap my head around the anti-war president not wanting to fight a fight. I can wrap my head around that. I can rationalize that, even though I disagree with it strongly. I can kind of understand it. But I don't I just don't get this. The only thing, like I just said, the only thing left, you look back on all the scandals, they were trying to prove points with what they were doing or with what they weren't willing to do in the case of Benghazi. But this one, I don't get, because how is grounding flights or shoring up the border during such a crisis not the absolute easiest decision and the most logical decision to make? I just, I'm thinking so much about this because every single morning I wake up and every single morning I kick on the radio or I turn on the news, this virus is spread. Now it's here. So, it's almost like you find out you have colon cancer, right? And it's very treatable, or it seems very treatable. And then you decide that you're going to start smoking cigarettes. I just don't understand the logic of assisting this disease that's already, put its roots down.
The American intellect just seems to have a cognitive dissonance with what you're offering. This idea that you have some sort of president that truly just doesn't want what's best for people. That's sort of just fundamentally rolled out for the most part.
I don't want to do what the left did with Bush. I don't want to take Obama because I dislike his policies and every single decision. Let me give you a quick example, and I know you're in the middle of something. This stuff with Michelle and the food, this big food movement she had. This is where I part ways, because I think I'm against the big government. I'm against big government all the way down to telling you should wear seatbelts. I'm against big government trying to regulate what you eat. I'm against all that. But if you have a first lady that's trying to do something good when it comes to an already established government program, instead of serving pizza, she wants to serve healthy food. I'm not rooting for her to fail. Now, she failed, but I don't take any joy in that whatsoever because I dislike her as a person or dislike her policies.
I understand the point you're making. Yeah, I understand the point.
So I'm not looking, everything Bush did for about, I would say a good solid 6 years. Every single solitary thing that Bush did, people were rooting for him to fail, and they found things that were not even true in his governance that they picked apart. I don't want to do that with this guy.
The left does think that that's what we do, but the difference, I think, Luke, the difference between the two instances is all this skepticism didn't need to come from the grassroots like it's coming from in this case. It came from the mainstream media. With George W. Bush, everything was suspect. In fact, they threw all the conspiratorial ideas right out of the gate at the guy. In this case, we're literally trying to go down the line and check off any kind of rational explanation that we can come up with. And I think millions of Americans share this sentiment. We don't have any idea what these people are doing. It strikes us as totally and completely insane. I hear that everywhere.
I feel that a Clinton, who really likes to be popular, would actually do a much better job, because the public sentiment right now is, what the heck are you doing? And the strong ideology of Obama keeps him from doing the right thing, versus a Clinton who wants, a good legacy and people to like him, and same thing with her.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting thought. You're right. At this point, it's like self-preservation and ego, like by way of like personal ego rather than ideological ego, would serve the country way better. You know what's interesting too? I have to tell you, in the light of the handling, the federal handling of Ebola, and of course the last couple national tragedies as well, how people still somehow come up with this idea that the federal government is going to save them or protect them. I just sit in awe, like mouth open awe, at the fact that at least 45% of the American people will still vote. This fool's errand mindset that their government is competent, or even if they would choose them over some power play.
I suppose a good portion of it is, do you know how when people get kidnapped, they end up forming this really strong bond with their captors? There's actually a name for it.
Yeah, Stockholm. Yeah.
Without trying to be funny, I really do think that it's like a pathology. The same thing that keeps this president from doing the right thing because his ideology is so strong at this point, I think that's the same thing that keeps people.
I think that's really insightful.
Individually and then collectively as a group.
The left has been genius about this. It's become kind of just an emotion. It's become, when you, despite the facts on the ground, despite the results, when you think leftward, you think good. If you're just an imbecile. And I mean, that's a powerful thing. This is one of these rare instances where guys like you and me that really keep a political IQ pretty high, it doesn't do you any favors in this one, because you're just as clueless as the layman. You're looking on and you're thinking, I have no idea what these people are doing. And if you listen to the political pundits, they all sound like this. They're all scratching their head in bewilderment. Nobody has anything. You can't even believe that this is happening.
It went from, feeling relatively far away out down in Dallas to hitting really close home to you. I mean, it's hit your state already.
It's an hour. It's an hour from me.
I don't blame these nurses. I don't
blame the nurse either.
I blame the illegal African guy who was patient zero. I blame him, and nobody likes to talk about the fact that he was here illegally.
And tell me how bad the country has to be for, I think it's H8 or something virus, killing kids, an airborne virus, killing kids directly connected to South America. And you don't hear hardly anything about it because it's like triage in the news. It's like so much stuff's going on. We only have 24 hours a day to talk about stuff.
À Broclo, les productions.
The president would come out and he makes some sort of freaking public service announcement to Liberia, which is none of his business. Well, it's not his country. I don't understand what he thinks. Does he think he's the president of the world? Again, irrelevant. So he makes some sort of public service announcement saying, oh, it's okay, don't panic. You can sit next to people on the bus. You're not going to get it, which is